I see it.
Okay, we're getting there. Let me. All these little buttons.
So many.
All right. Hello, everyone.
Okay, we're
We're
getting there.
live, I believe. I hope. Let me
It seems like
double
it.
check. If not, we're just going to have a great conversation anyway, which we'll do. Um, so, welcome to our up close this week. I'm
All
talking
right.
with Mr. Joe
Hello,
Bill.
everyone.
You can see right there.
We're can you hear yourself
Live.
feeding back? I
Oh,
hope.
yeah, I forgot to put the
Um,
mute on the.
Seems double check.
Yeah.
If not, we're just gonna have
So
a
there
great
we go.
conversation anyway.
I just love the sound of my own voice that much. I like to get three of them going at the same time.
I love it.
Anyways, so welcome, first of all.
Thanks.
And for those of you who have been here before, you know the routine. Joe and I are just going to have a conversation about improv and maybe other stuff that's related. Um, and hopefully you will enjoy it. Again, Unexpected Productions is doing a variety of different shows during the course of the week. I'll talk more about those at the end. Uh, we're also still raising money. These broadcasts are all free right now, but if you feel that you enjoy it or you don't enjoy it and want to stop, give money to us. Either way, we'll take it. And if you have questions, I'm going to be following it on Facebook as well. And there is a little bit of a delay, but if you have a question or a comment, feel free to share it. Otherwise, Joe and I can definitely, we're used to sort of just filling a lot of space with each other. So, so
For years.
we can do that too. And let me just organize myself here.
Mm-hmm.
So, cool. So, Joe, thank you so much for doing this.
Pleasure, Randy. Good to see you. Thanks
Yeah,
for
it's
having me.
good to be seen. And we were talking beforehand about how we usually connect once or twice a year,
Mm-hmm.
and but not now because the world is totally different.
Yep. It's I always love coming to the market and having an extended lunch with you.
Right.
And yeah, it's nice because my sister lives out there, so whether I'm out there for improv things or not, we usually get a visit in, so it's nice to have this.
Yeah. And whatever you do, don't leave your house because
No,
cops are waiting for you right outside the door.
cops are waiting right outside the door. But I told you before, I think the heat index in Chicago is like 93,
Ugh.
and I haven't turned on the news to see what the nature of our the whatever the military zone downtown is going to be. So, but it is not a recipe for peaceful interaction, I don't think.
Right, right. Cool. Um, so you've been doing improv a long time, as have I,
Hmm.
and you think we'd have it down by now. Um,
I'm kind of glad we don't. Then what would be the point?
well, that's true too. So, I mean, you have a long, storied improv career that a lot of people know. I won't spend a lot of time talking about it because a lot
Sure.
of people know it.
Yep.
But I am curious because I don't think a lot of people know how you found improv. Like, what was the first time you saw improv, and what was the appeal of it, and then how did you find it? Because when you and I both started in improv, it was hard to find. There were no improv schools.
Y-
You just
y-
had to search church basements until you found one. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a little piece of drama class in high school, and so it was 1977, September of 1977, that I first discovered what? No script? You mean we can just do anything? So to a 15-year-old kid who is prone to a lot of make believe for a lot of different reasons, that the idea appealed to me, and then no, I guess it was my sophomore year in high school, and then I got into the performing group um, in my high school, Broad Ripple High School in Indianapolis, which is now no more. And we would improvise mimes, like 1 minute mimes. It was kind of a little short story, so we learned a little bit of story structure. Um, and then we would play some short form games and stuff, and it was pretty much short form was all that there was. And I, in the summer between high school and college, there was a group that was made up of radio and TV people who were mostly behind the scene engineer types in Indianapolis. And they were doing short form at a little theater in Broad Ripple. This would have been 1980, summer of 80, I think. And they had auditions, and I auditioned, and I became the kid in the group. So I was the 18-year-old kid with a bunch of like audio and techie engineer types. This is before I think any of the sports, the comedy theater, whatever sports.
Right.
But it was just it's like line games and just basic Spolin-based stuff, I think. And I was just thrilled to be, I was the tallest one in the group, and I was the youngest one in the group, so I kind of stuck out. And I think for more than anything, it just taught me to kind of like own my own space and work through the fear, and
Right.
and also learn to be made fun of.
Is it on? So the just double checking, making sure I'm always paranoid about this.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's cool because I found a similar thing where it appealed to me as a teenager, and then I just somehow fell into the right place at the right time, totally by accident.
You were a teenager when you found Dell, or Dell found you, weren't you?
Yeah, sort of late teenager. But I mean, I started improvising when I was 15 with a group of people that really had no idea what they're doing, including our teacher at the time. But then eventually I found Dell through a teacher here named Roberta McGuire, who I think you may have met.
Yeah.
But she was in several of Dell's Second City companies after he'd come back from the committee. And so that group, which I was in, we started with Herald, which was really unusual to start with Herald and then find kind of short form. I mean, it was around in other groups, but yeah. So
was he teaching specific games? Like when I first, Sharna taught Herald, and then Dell taught What Else Can We Do when I came to Chicago.
Right.
But then the typical, like the game you would learn is Man on the Street, and then it was kind of an emphasis on like finding organic game within Herald.
Yeah.
Was that what were the game slots
Well,
at Herald when you first?
At the very beginning, it was a lot of getting, at least in my experience, there was a lot of sort of basic Herald stuff. And I think Dell was definitely much more interested in the Herald at the time. And it seemed like later on, then he got more interested. At one point he told me like the goal of his class is to invent a new long form every 8 weeks if you can.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were obviously variations on Heralds, but
didn't he claim before he died that everything was Herald if it lasted 20 minutes?
12.
Oh, was it 12?
Yeah, he told me. He said, in fact, I might have him on tape. I did his last interview, which was actually about anger and comedy. And then we did a bunch of other stuff, just trying to get him on tape talking. And I'd love to get that out, at least transcribed. But at one point he said, yeah, and any improvisation, 12 minutes or longer is a Herald.
I thought I remember him saying something about a group getting a suggestion and then theatrically brainstorming and then producing a piece of theater based on that, I think was what I remember.
Right.
But who knows?
Yeah, I mean, he was super loose about it. When I talk about Heralds to my students and people who I'm directing in Herald, I often will say that, that's how loose Dell was willing to go with it. I said, but, personally, I think he's wrong because of the intent of an improv that might be 12 minutes or longer might be very different than the Herald. If I'm doing any genre show, right?
Yep.
The intent of the genre show is much different than, say, the intent of a Herald.
That's right. So. If I teach Herald anymore, and I stopped teaching, even when I was teaching at IO in the early aughts, I was kind of the level in between Herald and Noah. So it was other formats, and there were some formats I refused to teach. But I came to teach Herald like a group meditation. So I teach Herald as a psychological proposition. Sure. So it's how to be, and then every format that I do that's derivative, right, is just how do we have ourselves open and present and ready to react or respond. And as much as anything for me, format is managing the personalities of the people that are about to enter into it that I'm directing or teaching or coaching, and having openness amongst everybody. So like just at the very basic level, likes and dislikes are articulated and boundaries are articulated. And then it's just, especially in festivals, I would never rehearse anything as the format that we're going to do and present as the format. It's wax on, wax off, right? Like you get people ready for stuff, and if, and then the general rule before you go on is whatever happens is supposed to happen, and so play.
Right.
And so to me, it's the same thing as Herald, and I think, I understand why some people teach Herald as structure, but for me, that's, that's not what I bring to it. And I think Herald as structure in a way has become like a long short form game.
Right. But then how has that played out in IO? Because a lot of that has come out of like the Truth and Comedy book and IO, the three stories, three scenes.
Well, I mean, the reality is you never get through. The third bank never gets there because they don't let them run long enough. The second thing is, even in the days when I studied, 10 people is the worst possible number for a Herald team. And I hate, like, I'll take 11 just to not have 10 in anything that I direct because I hate the number 10. So right. I'm not going crazy. And in the later years, I would try to watch at least 5 or 6 Heralds a year, and just, I think because the Herald Commission in the later years of IO was made up of a lot of comedy sports people, and because I think Sharna's taste was for the laugh, she definitely has that comedy club owner 3 laughs a minute mentality, whether she'll cop to that or not.
Right.
But if there's not laughs, then there's part of Sharna's brain is going to hit you for it. Because, and in a way she's not unlike Mick in that way, like for all the organic, weird, annoyance-y stuff, like Mick is pretty rooted in it should be funny. And so the Heralds that I saw in the last 10 years of IO looked nothing like the type of stuff we were doing, or that I thought that Dell was going for post-Herald studies with Sharna in the 80s. It was very much clever, lunchbox characters, find the bit, game of the scene, pre-UCB, in a way it was almost like Chicago, which has always been a training ground, but you could see some people already work in game of the scene so that they can move to New York or LA and study UCB and maybe go into writing or whatever. So,
right.
Yeah.
How do you think that influence, with your experience in Chicago, that notion that, like when I talk about improv to students, I go, if you're doing improv in places like, Seattle, Austin, Atlanta, a ton of other places, you're doing improv because you love improv. Because you're not necessarily going to parlay doing an improv career in Seattle into a bigger thing without a couple of steps between. But like LA, Chicago, New York, that's like the big elephant in the room of everybody's using improv as a stepping stone to something else. How have you seen the positive and negative impacts of that on the work?
Oh, well, I think that there's more definitions that are attached to different people's tastes under the banner of improv. So I think it's become like cable. There's so many different types of improv and everybody's need to label different approaches to improv. I think those labels have happened. I think Chicago's always been a grad school. And I think, an upside of the pandemic is it's shaken everything up. I mean, who knows what's going to happen to Second City? IO's done for good. I think Annoyance so far is looking okay, but like all the institutions are kind of burning down. And now, I don't know what the state of the work now is this. It's essentially it's whatever we do on this is a puppet show.
Right.
And then it's like, well, what kind of puppets do we want to be? And including literally puppets. And so, you and I both, I always give you credit as one of the people that sort of opened the European doors for me, just as, by your recommendations. I mean, I had to go, not make you look like an idiot, and it worked out. But I do, in terms of the state of the work, I think I prefer going over to Europe, and I do prefer going overseas because, one, they are rooted more traditionally in narrative, and they have a thirst for what Chicago is. But really, where I slot in is pretty adjacent to you. And so there's some Dell stuff I can bring. There's Annoyance and Dell stuff, and then there's Spolin and other that I like to incorporate. So as far as the work goes, I prefer that. I prefer comedy as a consequence, not as a goal.
Right.
And so that's. And I think I typed that in to the end of the Aretha chat you had last week. That's kind of been one of my mantras for the last 20 years is comedy as a consequence. It's a hard sell to some people,
Yeah.
but I don't have the taste for people trying to be funny. And if if the agreement is they're going to be funny, I think I just as soon watch a clown show and watch suffering. For the sake of watch honest suffering for the sake of funny as opposed to clever or whatever.
Right.
So, does that even answer the question about what has it done to the work? I mean,
Yeah, well, I just wonder, if people are not necessarily, I mean, some obviously are. So this is an overgeneralization of, some people are not necessarily, you are, and there are definitely other people who are sort of caretaking the art form of improv. The whole Bill's thing about improv is an art form onto its own, right? And then there are other people who are not because it's just a pit stop on the way to something else.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's allowed to be both. And I would even say it's improv is like an art medium more than it's even an art form. Like paint is an art medium. I guess painting's an art form as well. This is one of those times where Pasquazi's voice is in my head where it's yeah, what we do is important, but let's not get precious about it.
Sure.
And I think improv happens in unartistically declared ways all the time since the beginning of our species. So I think the great thing about aging is it's just about kind of finding my niche and finding other like-minded people like it always was. And there will be people interested in improvising the way I'm interested in improvising. And then letting go of the ego of my youth and the need to try to control everybody's perception and what they do with it. Or, we talked a little bit about just, everybody wants to be the inventor of something. So many of these younger people, they want to have I invented this, I discovered that. I'm and nothing's original. And so, yeah, I do feel like I'm a curator of a piece of the improv puzzle, but I also feel at best, maybe I die as a set of shoulders that helps raise somebody up on. But that's not even for me to see. And I also stand side by 100 other, as a random number, great teachers in the world that I miss really dearly right now. I miss improv teachers and other traveling people more than I miss actual family members.
Well, we could go into therapy if you like.
Yes. Oh yeah, sorry. Wrong interview. Wrong meeting.
Right, that's the next Zoom meeting. Right. Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, and that notion of not being precious, that Pasquazi's talking about, totally agree with, but it's also the notion, I've said for decades, wouldn't it be great if improv was about something? And it doesn't have to be about precious things, or it doesn't have some huge political or social statement to make, but it's about what it's like to be alive right now, and the things that you and I encounter in our daily lives that we can put on stage are the same things that the audience is experiencing during the course of their days. And so, but just the goal of comedy, right? You lose that because then it becomes anything for a laugh in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it's masturbation and it's not sex, if I can use the crude thing. But it's also, the other analogy I would say is like, if it's precious, it's for the audience to say. Like, I'm kind of in Keith's camp here, where like what we're doing is for the audience. And so I guess where Keith and Del come together is the idea of like artist, poet, genius. It's for the artist. Let's let them, you know, our process is the product that they're witnessing. But if we're up there steeped in our own awareness of the preciousness of what we're doing, then we're not doing what we're there to do. It's like watching an Irish tenor sing, and if, you know, I don't want to confine it to Irish, but they're the best example. But there's some Irish tenors that when they sing Danny Boy, nobody's loving their voice more than them, and it ruins the song for me. Like, the audience should be enjoying it on a different level than the people on stage. Not that the people on stage shouldn't enjoy it, but what we're doing is tending to each other in a way that, and I suppose it's objective. Like, of course we keep in mind the audience and what they're doing, and this, you know, this gets into a little bit of school of thought thing, but I think for me, my taste is that the preciousness is for somebody else to attribute.
Right. Yeah, it's I mean, it's the goal of, you know, if you're on stage, and maybe this goes to some of that difference in terms of people who are using it as a stepping stone to get somewhere else because they want to get noticed.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like the improviser's job is to be, as I always say in classes, to be advocates for the audience. My job is to get your life experience, audience member, and translate it into theater, because that's what I've been trained to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that you can watch it and go, oh, that's my life put on stage. And the various things related around that are skills that maybe I have that particular audience member, one, doesn't have, and two, doesn't want to think about because they're terrified of getting on stage themselves.
Yeah.
And in that case, then you've got this process where I'm in service of the audience rather than, hey, watch me be clever guy. And, you know, and so you're here for me versus, no, I'm here for you, the audience.
That's right. And I think it's an important delineation. And at the same time, there's different people can be in service to the audience in different ways. And so for me, like, the skills we have are acting skills, essentially.
Right.
But what I'm dealing in is honesty as much as I can. You know, honesty in the illusion or delusion in which I imagine us playing. And if, you know, now we're into the jazz metaphor, where it's just like, if we're really paying attention to each other and we've each got our acts, and our acts is this, and we're just in that sense of play, what they're there to see is our discovery and human celebration in that moment that then appears to them to be like a vessel of great artistry. But I'm certainly, you know, there's always that part in all of our heads, no matter how long we've done it, there's a voice ready to tell us, like, bullshit, bullshit. It's, you know, at least for me, I can't stand a second of self-congratulations. If something artistic seems to be happening, I can't pay attention to that, but I can feel when I'm keeping it honest, and then I trust that because of experience, that is then taking care of the audience. Right. And that's just that's how I can individually be of service.
Yeah, well, and it's, Del Close used to say, audience smells bullshit, right? And but to unpack that a little bit, it's like you're connecting the audience to the work that you're doing so that they see themselves in it in a way, not necessarily, word by word, but they go, oh, I know people like that, or oh, I'm like that too, or boy, I'm glad I'm not like that. Then they connect with that energy, in addition to us, say, playing jazz together, in addition to that, again, kinetic energy that's between us that you had to be in the room to see, right?
Yep.
And if it's not there, then that's that kind of bullshit odor of like, this is bullshit. This is nothing. There's nothing going on here. Right?
Yeah. Nobody wants to see anybody trying, unless it's framed as that. It's like, I mean, comedy sports is the ultimate package trying, right. and it's packaged to use success and failure in the same way, which is the promise of comedy. Right. And so if that's your cup of tea, cool. That's, you're a lot of people love that, and they're allowed to. And and I also want to have enough chops that I can jump into a comedy sports show or like any thing that's outside of what my normal palette of taste would be. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, it's all, it's so individual, and for sure an audience they can smell bullshit. And I think it's also, I feel like Mark Sutton and I got very lucky with Bassprov, because against all the advice of everybody who said nobody's going to sit and watch two guys pretend like they're fishing while they drink beer and talk. But I think because the idea of Bassprov is really rooted in the truth of everybody's driven down a road and seen two guys out on a lake in a boat fishing and wondered to themselves, I wonder what those guys are talking about. And at least if we play characters that matter to each other, like I am interested in you, I have a point of view about whatever it is, I have a heart, and even more than that, like I need to be here in this boat with you because I am the least flawed version of myself in this boat than I am in my entire life. And now we've got something, because every human has a place of sanctuary that they go to, and now by default, the context, if we keep it honest and we're not fishing for Kardashian jokes, if we keep it honest, then we know that we're going to be in the realm of what the audience interest is going to be.
Right.
And you played that show with us
Yeah.
10 years ago or whatever.
And well, it's also interesting because it's also based not only on the characters, but it's the people, the guys in the boat. So with you and Mark in the boat, it's much more interesting. And this gets to not an argument, a conversation with a number of people in this forum online, which is mistaking structure for the whole thing. So to me, and I use Bassprov as an example, I said Bassprov, led off to a bunch of whole spin-off things of, hey, it's two guys in a park, it's two people in a laundromat, it's two people, and most of them didn't work because people were relying on the structure, right? We just need the environment and the structure for it to work, but it's like, no, it depends on who those two people are.
That's it.
And all the ones that have worked in various forms and in various settings, I always go, well, those are two really interesting improvisers to watch.
And it's kind of the parallel to even to bigger group long form, like all structure is just a frame that we want to put a beautiful picture in, you know, and that picture is theater, that picture is relationship, that picture is honesty, or if it's tied to a promise of a genre or a hero's journey or whatever, we're going to deliver on that. But we can't just construct a story and be happy that we worked a puzzle. We can,
Right.
but we want to play people within that affect each other.
Right. Well, I love that notion because I do something similar, which I'll lay on you in a second. But I love the idea of it, like in improvisation, what we need to be doing is focusing on the picture rather than being frame makers, right? And my analogy is the Buddhist idea that the bowl is made of wood, but it can contain anything. Like, well, let's pay attention to what it's containing. Let's not go, isn't this a great bowl?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Like, what is it holding? It holds water. It holds ideas. It holds greens. It holds flowers. And let's focus on that stuff versus just this really great bowl.
There's a great YouTube thing. There's a guy named Murray Nossel, and I think he talks about storytelling. It's two South African guys, and one guy tormented the other guy, but this guy Murray Nossel, and he said, listening is the container that we build so we can put the content inside, and the content is our response to each other. And when I saw that, I just like hit pause and like rewound it, and I just thought that's a really, really great idea. And I wish I could remember more about the title, but if you look up Murray Nossel, I think it's Nossel, and there's another guy, and I think they have a TED Talk, but it's about listening, and it really is, it gets to the type of listening that I value when I'm on stage with other people.
Right. I'll watch it and have a gentle cry.
Yeah. Oh no, we're back into therapy. Back out.
Right. I'm sorry.
So sweep edits or tag outs, Randy?
What about how do you think experience plays into this? Because I mean, you and I are tending to work with more experienced improvisers, but I'm also seeing like a lot of improv with that reliance on the structure. They think the structure is going to save them. And so you have people who are not necessarily prepared with all the tools, kind of maybe prematurely coming out. And my big thing with that, or I worry about, is that they're going to have a series of bad experiences that are going to push them further and further away, either away from improv or more and more towards overly structured, same bits, same stuff all the time.
Yeah. I mean, humans sure do enjoy that which is proven to work. and and that's an interesting proposition. I think I'm aligned with you on this, and I try not to worry. And I also think that in a way as teachers, like, I buy into this idea that, like, we really can't teach people to improvise. We can much more help them get out of their way that which is not improvisation, just to, let's bang the Buddhist drum a little bit.
Right.
And the whole idea about, like, falling into the belief that what worked once might work again, or this is the thing that's going to work. I mean, that's that whole attachment to outcome thing. If you're attached to the outcome, then you're not in the process of the moment. And this is all esoteric. I don't know if I'm sniffing our butts too deeply here, but but I mean, it's true. It's like, I don't think that. Man, I guess if I have any ego worry, it's that like this type of improvisation might get lost, or that if it, the shiny side of that coin is, well, then I'll always have a job teaching. Because I don't think that people listen to each other on stage in the way that can optimize what improvisation can be, which is especially in the direction of what my taste is.
Right. Right. So,
and I should say, it's fair if somebody finds a formula and it works. It works. It makes me think of part of why I love Europe is Europeans are so much more. They're trained more broadly than North Americans, and even Canadians are trained better than Americans. But you get people that have, like, clown and have mime and have, comedia background and whatnot. There's some guys, Miku from Milan, right? Mm-hmm. Here's a guy who his English is terrible, but he could be in any show because he gets what's going on, and he calls on clown skills, and that guy is fucking funny, and he makes funny choice, and it looks at the same time like he's done it 1,000 times, and it's the first time he's doing it. And I don't know, is that just him? Or is that experience, to your question?
I think it's training, because definitely in that part of Europe, people here, and I've mentioned this a lot about, like in North America, at least, particularly the U.S., we can trace our roots pretty much back to Viola Spolin and Neva Boyd before her, a little bit kind of leading into it. And then that's kind of where it goes, where you have a lot of people in North America going, oh, it traces its roots to, Commedia dell'arte. And I go, no, you can see it. Like, if you watch American improvisers and then you watch, like, Italian or French improvisers,
Mm-hmm.
you get more of the clowning, you get more of the commedia influence, and it's just a different beast. And you can just go, same language, totally different dialects, right? And
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the archetype of character versus the situation of where are we, what the fuck's going on. That's, it's an interesting. I'm with you. I think it's an interesting conversation and observation, but at the end of the day, it's like we're from different places. We don't know each other. We don't even speak the same language. What if we do gibberish and have a cup of coffee? It's right.
Right. Sure. Right.
And those things that can have you have a pleasant interaction in that simple context, to me, seems what a lot of North American improv is founded on.
Okay.
Because it's, and this goes back to a discussion argument. Mick and I don't have it anymore because we're too old to have it. But I used to say familiarity breeds better improvisation, and Mick said better improvisers breed better improvisation.
Right.
And so with familiarity, the idea is, what if you treat each other like you're familiar? And that's where kind of the rules or tenets of improv come. But you shouldn't need words. You shouldn't need language. It's just like, where are we? What's going on? How do we feel? how are we affecting each other.
Right.
Um,
Well, and that was sort of the great level playing field that Viola Spolin brought in her next
yes.
work, which then led to her book. Well, you've got a bunch of different people from different languages and countries and cultures. How do we
Hmm.
get them to work together? Well, we level the playing field by making it not about language, about transcending language.
Yep. Which is, yeah, I mean, that's my point.
Right.
It's not necessarily archetype. You know, there's 9 different possibilities of the way you can gibberish and have a cup of coffee. There's no, it's just, you know, you're in a coffee shop. You have a cup of coffee. You will use gibberish.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that, it's a difference between saying there are 9 different archetypes. So, and this goes back to that structure thing. So there are 9 different archetypes. I'm going to find the one that I'm doing and
Hmm.
check it off because that's I've got the 9 different archetypes
Hmm.
versus thinking of the way like if you're going to use that language to say there are 9 discovered archetypes so far,
Hmm.
right? Because then you can find something and go, hey, this is the 10th one, or hey, this is the 11th one, or and right, then you keep expanding out.
Sure. And the neuroscience complication of that is there's a difference in the brain of creation versus the brain of recreation. And so I prefer the brain of creation. But I also know how to use the brain of recreation. And at best, it's intuitively. But if I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to go ahead and make this move, the move might work, the walk on might work, the spit take might work. But, you know, I still have to wake up with myself in the morning. I don't mean that in a pejorative way. Oh God, it just keeps wanting to go to therapy.
Well, we can do that later.
Later, yeah. That's yeah. I miss our drinks and chowders at the market, man.
Yeah, well, hopefully one day soon we'll all be able to be back together.
Yep.
So, in your travels, in your experience,
Hmm.
and maybe this is too broad a question, but I'm kind of curious as to like the thing you're noticing right now in a positive sense. You kind of go, improv has evolved in this way, and let's not let that go away. And then two, this is like the one thing I wish would go away, right? That one thing that if we could only get rid of some of this, things would just get better. And again, don't overthink it too much. But I'm
Yeah.
just curious because you travel a lot. You obviously have years of experience. So
Um, what I've seen and lived more, especially overseas, is a sense of honoring each other when you're on stage, and I hope that doesn't go away. And even in the Zoom stuff, the best or most compelling stuff I've seen on Zoom is where there is a sense of not just having fun, selfish fun, but like honoring each other. Um, and I hope that, and I think coming out of the fucking global pandemic, a piece of what has to happen is an acknowledgement of the separation that we've just endured on a human level.
right,
Not to get too big, but I mean, I think that fucking sandwich is going to be big enough to eat till I'm out of here. I mean, and it's also selfish because I just as soon play in that space, right? The thing that's been emerging even before the pandemic, you know, it used to be easy to say keep your ego out of it, but even more specifically, it's the marriage of a sense of entitlement and comparing yourself to other people. This I think our society has grown into a horrific cocaine fueled version of keeping up with the Joneses that was like the 50s and 60s thing, where I think it's so destructive for people as artists to compare themselves to other people. And I think as improvisation has become this institutionalized process, which can lead you to careers and, you know, as opposed to 40 years ago or 45 years ago when maybe there was 100 people on earth who knew what a herald was. um, it's not it's just not there's it's pointless, it's useless, it's self-indulgent, it's anti-art. It's it if especially if there's two people on stage. Like if I sometimes I'll walk on stage with a younger person and they'll have some type of intimidation or there's some type of they want to be enough or whatever. And for me it's like my highest fixation, my neurotic fixation is like how can I find what, makes them feel a spark, right?
Right.
And I'm not even aware of it. I just like I do that, but there's always a part of me that feels sad when, like, after a show and you see somebody younger who's come off stage and they judge themselves as not doing as good as another person or like whatever. So there's my mid-lengthy answer to your question.
Right.
What if I throw that back to you? Like, what do you hope stays and what do you hope goes?
I hope, and this again kind of overgeneralizes it, but I think you know what I mean when I say I hope the collaboration between whether it's one-on-one on stage, which is kind of what you were just talking about as well. That power of collaboration remains a focus in improv versus the power of showboating, or taking care of oneself
Mm-hmm.
solely for comedic purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's about me getting my laughs in versus me taking care of somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hope that power of collaboration, and it's something I've really come back to, finding that it's always been there as part of the mix, but really focusing on it has happened over the last, I don't know, 5, 6 years, and then all these happy gifts have come out of that, just discoveries that, like the original days of improv, things I didn't know better, so this magical thing happened.
Yeah.
Because if I knew better, I probably would have just ruined it.
Yeah.
So, so that's one. Two is the dismissal of improv in even within the circle of improvisers. Like somebody I would love to give them credit because it's not me. But said something about, it's hard for improv to really establish itself as an art form if improvisers don't even respect it.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's something I would love to have go away. And the only way that goes away is if we turn that into a positive and turn it into respecting the art form and respecting the craft and those who are doing it, at all different levels.
Yeah, it's such a great point. And I think it's, right at that apex, then it branches into like greater inclusivity and greater proactivity and inviting others into it. And it goes into one of the greatest things that I started doing because I'm an idiot, 8 years ago, was improvising in French.
Right.
And I'm a completely different improviser, but it is also to put myself in the hands of other improvisers in another language. There's so few Americans in the U.S. that are willing to do that are willing to play in another language and to all of my superpowers in French are gone. Like I can't do what I do in English, but yet it's, for all the hits the French take, and it's like I have that little piece on my mother's side that's French and I feel a thing when I'm there. But the French people that I play with are so generous and so caring and so, there's something about, it's clown or it's about fucking up or failing or it's existentialism or it's very,
Right.
in this time, I find this time to be very Beckett. It's a very, what the fuck is going on? What are we doing here? What's the point of life? There is no point of life. I'm just an Irishman who wants to go live in France before the war starts and join some type of resistance. But it's all of those things that I think, because it's been a sort of institutionalized, primarily white process in North America. I think it's going to be the inclusiveness of the othered that is really going to have to happen if improvisation is to get to that place that you speak of.
Sure. Well, and it's also interesting. Two things. One is about doing improv in French because, I had I've told this story many times before, so I may have even told you. But going there, they would go, we have all these problems, blah 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 blah, and all this stuff, and I'd go, okay, great. We would start working, and we'd work in English, and then I'll solve all the problems, and then I would leave, right? And then 6 months later, I'd get in touch with them again. They go, all the problems are back, right? And it wasn't until I realized that I was having them do scenes in English
Yep.
that took away the vocabulary of creativity for them,
Mm-hmm.
that made them better improvisers.
Mm-hmm.
But why is it, I'd wonder if you're a better improviser in French because you don't have the, your bag of tricks that you can, rely on or pull out or execute well. And so now what I do is I have them, work in English till I feel that they understand the concepts, and then have them do scenes in their own language, native languages, so that I can also then kind of see if the problems come back right away. Because it's on me, the fact that I don't speak that language, it's on me to adjust, not to have them all adjust to me, which is like in festivals and things like that, a minor pet peeve, and I'm certainly part of it because it's happened for me when asked, is oftentimes you'll have, 10 French improvisers, 10 German improvisers, and like one or two English speakers. And then all of a sudden the show has to happen in English.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, it should be on us to have to adjust to you.
That's right.
Be able to perform in your native language.
That's right.
So,
And even when I'm doing so like my version of Herald is the scramble, which is kind of like what if we did a bat with the lights on. So it's chaos and everything. And for 5 years when I go abroad and I'm at festivals, I tend to teach or direct or facilitate an organic process that yields an organic show, but I always, whatever languages are present, whatever mother tongues are present, that they're going to be in the format. And so it's up to me to facilitate that and to create the space for that to be present and with the audience in mind. So, which means we're not going to just rely on verbal interaction, which is great because that's pretty much an American thing. There's a lot of other tools. The other thing is I discovered accidentally that I can watch improvisers in almost any language perform in their mother tongue, do scenes in their mother tongue, and I know when to call scene, and I don't know how. And with French, I can understand anywhere from 20 to 90% of what they're talking about. And my Spanish, because I live around Spanish all the time, I have a sense of the music of it. And even in Germany, my ears have started to adapt. It's like it's the Finns. It's Finnish is the only one I can't because everything is just dry and stoic and. But I think it's the terror of perform. Italian drives me crazy because my ears want to hear Spanish, but it's not Spanish. And I realize this is a very Zen thing. It's like I just have to watch the scene and experience the scene and relax when I teach, I kind of lean on, we have an engineer and a jazz musician in our brain, and you want them to work in harmony. So if I'm trying to understand, if I'm trying to translate, that's engineer brain, and I become blind to the jazz.
right.
And that's foundational in anything I teach. But the terror also lies in the engineering part of the brain. If I'm trying to understand, then I'm missing what I'm there to do anyway.
Right.
And why not make me the vulnerable person where like I don't understand what you're saying, but if I'm worth my salt, I ought to be able to watch a scene in any language and give some type of helpful feedback. And that thought is still terrifying, but I think if I ever become not terrified, then I'll have to stop teaching.
Right. Right.
And you speak some German, don't you? Or do
Yes.
you ever play in German? Or?
Yeah, but most of it is understanding it, and most of that came from watching scenes in German. To pick up on it, you're like, okay, and and so I don't know enough, clearly not enough to be able to teach, but definitely like watching shows and things like that is much more enjoyable because I'm getting more of the picture. And definitely scenes in workshops, but doing shows in another or with a group in another language. I mean, part of what you're talking about is that faith in the free fall of I'm going to go on stage, sometimes with people I don't even really know all that well, but I'm going to take total trust that you're going to take care of me. You're not going to make me look like a fool. You're not going to make fun of me in your language so that I don't understand you. right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to follow good improv tenets, and if you follow good improv tenets, we're all going to look great,
Mm-hmm.
right? I want to go back to something you said earlier, but before I do, again, feel free to add some comments or ask questions as we're going along with this. Going back to that notion of, we were talking about inclusion, and I think that's a huge thing that we're covering even in North American improv now, where you have sort of all this calling out for inclusion, diversity, and stuff like that. And I know Chicago has gone through a whole bunch of changes with that.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely happened. Well, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And in your experience as one of the so-called privileged white guys,
Mm-hmm.
right, in improv, what have you noticed as a change in the Chicago scene, if not the scene somewhere else? But I don't know if you've spent enough time in those places um, to remark on it.
Well, it's I mean, first off, I do own the privilege, and it's like I don't think it's so called. So subjectively for me, I have privilege, and I was talking to Will Luera about this, and it's if you think about communication, it's listening and responding, and the two necessary evils in society are preachers and shrinks. And I think in the face of inclusion, which has to happen, there need to be more black and brown voices. There needs to be more gender and sexual diversity. Anybody that's been othered by the privileged sector, they need to raise up. And I think, I think one of the consequences of not being attached to just one institution here in Chicago is I'm not from just one school, and I've been sensitive to sort of a lack of inclusion, but I kind of do my own thing. And I'm less of a preacher and I'm more of a shrink. So I'm more of a person that listens. And I also have life experience. I was a white guy that grew up with black people. And I really didn't even understand racism until I got to college and I heard actual racists. And I was like, oh my God, what the fuck is wrong with you? And so for me, it's in righting the wrongs of systemic problems that are way bigger than any individual. I think there's people that are playing preachers and there's people that are playing shrinks, but it's like to expand the metaphor into a militaristic proposition, it's going to take all branches of service in order for a victory to be had. Right. And that means that generals are just as important as privates, are just as important as tank drivers and pilots and crossing guards and whatever. Like, it has to be on all levels. And it just starts with be a person who's open and, even as a creative practice, what if you just entertain the idea as a white person? What if you entertain the idea like, okay, I'm a racist, and at the end of the day, I will not have done enough to address systemic racism and white supremacy? What if that is one of your truths each day, keeping in mind that many truths can be true at the same time? I suggest that as just a piece of creative thinking because it will address, and we're back to Buddhism, will address resistance. Will address the lack of ability to accept even the possibility, which I believe is a reality and it's obvious. For me as a shrink in the bigger fight, it's how can I listen to different people, whoever I'm in contact with, live my truth and live in love and not in fear. And that's the part that I can play. What's happening in Chicago is there's a giant movement like every place else where every branch of the social justice military is engaged. And I feel especially frustrated because I'm at risk because I've had bronchial stuff. I had lung surgery when I was younger, so I can't go out. I can't get in the streets. I feel like a piece of shit. I wish I could do more, but it's like I'm doing things where I'm bringing people together. I'm having people share stories. I do this thing every Friday where people all over the world just share stories in a simple format that I do. And in a way, it's a great act of resistance and fuck you to the nationalistic forces that exist in the world, which are largely, rooted in white supremacy and patriarchal like bullshit. So I know that's not an answer in terms of what I've seen in Chicago in some type of holistic what do you call it? I'm not giving medicine to anything.
Right.
But I mean, I think that we're both going to go to our graves with there still to be work to be done. And I don't think we can be daunted by that. I think it's just like we just have to, it's, God, I'm running out of metaphors, but it's Tim Robbins and Shawshank Redemption. We have a tiny, each one of us has a tiny little pick, and we just got to pick our ways out. And we're still, no matter how good our intentions, we're going to take hits along the way, and that's just part of the game. So
Right. Yeah.
apologies if that doesn't exactly address what you were asking.
No, 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 no. I mean, it's just curious. I'm trying to, with each of the guests, we talked a little bit about it, I think, and from various angles, various references, point of reference in people's lives, and what I find interesting in improv all around is that notion of what I hope remains a willingness for dialogue, and what I fear is that it will just kind of be, once all this is all over, then just back to normal, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's going to happen. At least that's not my sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also in the same accepting mind. I think it's worth accepting that a sense of shame, apology, and fear are always going to exist, but they can't be the cages we stay in. Like, we have to be active and imperfect. It's fucking improv. We have to be willing to go fail. It could just, whatever the proposition is ahead of us, whatever the form of communication or activism or whatever, it's just as likely to fail like an improv scene. But what if, what if our compulsion, like I have to improvise. It's, I have to be on stage. I have to communicate in that way. I have to do that type of performance with a possibility of art. And to me, it doesn't seem that far of a step to say, oh, there's also a social activist piece that's part of that. Right. And just because I don't understand the totality of it, I don't have a simple battle plan, I don't understand my role exactly, doesn't mean I can't participate and do.
Right.
So,
well, in continuing with the improv notion of let's try it,
mm-hmm.
Maybe it's going to fail. Probably more than likely, the initial impulses and efforts are going to fail. But then following that improv tenet of what do? You get up and you try something else.
Yeah.
Right? And you keep going. You keep getting up and doing stuff, trying to move everything forward. I mean, I'm excited about the possibility of bringing in all these different points of reference that I certainly don't have exposure to. There are certain things that I'm exposed to that other people aren't, and just finding that mix, I just see it as being a great opportunity for improvisation to really embrace a lot of new ideas, both even at the foundation of the art form. Being able to find some some stuff that we can incorporate right into the fabric of where improvisation is or where it's come from. I think is critical as well, because that's more of a definite foundational permanent change.
Yeah, and I think where improvisation is coming from is kind of if it is sort of I've always stressed harmony over unity, but in the harmony of what is improvisation, there's a unity, if that makes sense.
Right.
And if we all have that, plus we're all striving to or in embrace of what our voice is and who I am within this. For me, there's the performance part of this, but there's also, I'm just as much of a teacher as I am a performer. Mm-hmm. And when I teach corporate stuff, one corporate lesson I teach leaders is that a leader's job is to teach the next leader. And I also believe that a teacher's job is to teach the next teachers. So I suspect that I'm going to be a person, I think I'm a pretty good teacher, and I think I'm a good teacher of teacher and a trainer of trainers if we're working for a corporate check. But I think what I can do is I can help people teach. I can help people who want to become teachers that don't look like me, and to give them ideas that are not, that are maybe full of less bias, that are just from that core of what improvisation is, and to share some points of view, some language, some reading people, some therapy, some what, my voice is as a, you know, hobbyist neuroscientist, intuitive, whatever. I know who I am as that. And I suspect that I will be teaching more teachers as much as anything else I do in improvisation in the next 20 years.
Yeah, well, it's, I mean, we have all these schools, we have all these books that we didn't have definitely when when we were starting. Um, but but they're there. But I still, and maybe I'm just old school, but that notion of teaching teachers, passing along a tradition, because before it was always an oral tradition. It was who
Hmm.
you worked with and who you found and that kind of stuff. And there weren't the books, there weren't the schools. And so teaching teachers who are then going to carry on the tradition, I think, is just as important because I've yet to find it. I've found lots of great books
Hmm.
that have lots of great ideas in them. But I go, if this was all I had, I'm still not going to be able to kind of do a lot of the improv that I've seen.
Hmm.
Um, it's because it's there it is on the page, that kind of stuff. But it's not out in the world. It's not being done. It's not live in a room with somebody giving me feedback on how to make it better or how to improve the skill set. So
Yeah, and it's um, as much as anything, it's facilitating people to have the confidence to stand in front of a room as a teacher and know that they have something to give. I've thought this for a long time, and I still think it's more true than ever now, that per capita, there's a far greater number of good improvisers on earth than there are good teachers. And I think that that number disproportionately grows every year. Like I think there's just shitloads of good improvisers,
right.
but I think truly good teachers, you can be a good teacher if you just let improvisation be improvisation. But there is that hit you get when you first start teaching where it's like, oh my God, I just felt myself level up as an improviser. I just got better as an improviser. And now there's adrenaline, and then that feeds your ego. And then, now you're all of a sudden, it's just so distressing to see teachers, again, that none of us are inventing anything. We're all handing down, like you said, we're all handing down the lessons of the storied past. But it's like at the end of the day, we're there to serve those people that are there, and no matter if if it's okay, here we are, we're at a festival, and I'm going to teach this group to do a herald in a week. It starts with who's here, who
Right.
are these people here, and how can I get all of you, even if it's 10 of you, ready to be mentally prepared to accept what herald will give us on that night.
Right.
I'm not going to teach you three banks of scenes in a game and 10 different openings that maybe could happen.
Okay.
But that's just me.
Right, right, right. Okay, well, we're running over, but I do want to take time for one last question,
Okay.
which is I'm curious, and I mean, I'll give you a brief answer myself, but I'm curious because you've been improvising a very long time,
Mhm.
and a lot of your life has been spent in improv. Maybe, how do you think improv has changed your life? I mean, in what way? Like, if you had not improvised, what would be different, or what is different because you improvised? I guess would be a better way to put it.
I mean, this could be a 1 hour monologue, but let's try to keep it to 90 seconds. And then I would love to hear your answer. Um, I think my biggest truth is because I'm from the family that I'm from, my coping mechanisms as a child were all rooted in improvisation. And I, at a very, very early age, always had the idea that I was born into the wrong family and I need to get out of here. I need to escape. And there are other podcasts where I talk about the specifics of that. But what I've since learned, is that the skills that I gained in order to help me survive that familial situation and escape to what is eventually improvisation, and spend a decade that's the greatest and the worst decade of my life being a co-founder of a theater and having no idea who I was and having no idea of the trauma I was carrying, whatever. I feel like improv chose me from an early age, and all I've done is if there's any bravery, it's been brave enough to follow improv, even though it's felt like stupidity a lot of the times.
Right.
So there's my short answer, and I think I kept that under 90 seconds.
Well, a couple things that totally hit my story as well is one, I've always felt that improv chose me. I mean, I fell on improv completely by accident, and then, like I said, there were these magical moments and magical teachers and magical people that appeared in my life that, you know, I had no plan. So they just sort of were there. And part of it was timing, and part of it was access, just being connected to the right people who could get you into different place or steer you in a particular direction. And then to have those people take interest in your development, you know, and where are you going to go was a huge factor. And you know, I remember that I was sitting in one of Dell's workshops. Whenever I went to Chicago, I'd watch Dell teach, and he would always introduce me as the most over-gurued improviser in America. You know, because whenever I'm in town where somebody is, I'll watch him. And finally, he said, you know, well, why, you know, why do you do it? You know, why do you come? And I go, well, you know, it's great to see it because I want to see it from you. And one time in one of these classes, he said, he called me out, and I'd never once thought about this. He said, so, you know, Randy, my friend from Seattle, blah, blah, and he goes, Randy, you know, you started early, right? And I said, yeah, I was 15. And he said, how does it feel to have been doing improv for more than half your life? And it was like a bell going off in my head. I'd never once given it like a thought, really. And I've thought a lot about it since then, you know, and that's a long time ago now. So even more water's gone under that bridge. And I think it affects me in a positive way that I don't always do it really well, but I try to understand that. And I think I do focus it more in teaching and on stage than maybe I should focus it more in life on sort of really deep listening. I don't, you know, that comes and goes in life as it does for most of us, I think.
Yep.
But I definitely think I'm better at it in those moments than, you know, than I would be if I hadn't learned it, if I hadn't studied it and found the value in it. The second part of that is I don't think I would have valued my life as a story, and the power of story. You know, to me, stories and our experiences are much more valuable than money or fame or you know, whatever. And I always go to, in my class, I talk about, I have a Joseph Campbell quote, which is, the privilege of a lifetime is being who you are. And I think improv is a great way for people to explore that. Who are you? You know, you put it out there. This is who I am.
Yeah, and I would just put a post-it note on that. Another thing Dell had said, and Dell's just one of many that influenced me, but he said the three most influential things in his life were psychotherapy, psychedelic drugs, and improvisation. And so I've checked all those boxes. And I think every single one of them, embedded in every single one of them, is exactly what you just said, which is just like, that's who I am. That's how I found myself. That's how I know what this is, even as knowing what this is evolves.
Right. Cool. Well, thanks, Joe.
We did it.
We did it. And we did it in front of people. We're just sitting across the table from each other, which we'll have to do some other time, or we'll Zoom again. Just us, and we'll do the therapy thing. That's what.
We'll do the therapy. We'll just once I would love sometime in the next month or before school starts, let's just have like a little happy hour together for old time's sakes, and pour a drink and have a little after dinner.
Yeah. Okay, you're on.
Great, Randy. Thanks so much, buddy.
All right, hang on.